Welcome, everybody, to Tune In Tuesday, session 11A, on the one body of original Christianity, because I say 11A, because we're going to have Reverend Ed Horney join us again for the second half, and that'll be session 11B, and I expect that we will be greatly blessed with his segment. It's been a privilege to work with him and key off of each other's insights. It is how ministers and ministries ought to work, not compete, but cooperate and enhance the body of Christ. And tonight, we're going to be featuring some more of the big 7 ministries. These are the ones that are listed in Ephesians 4 and part of 1 Corinthians 12. Ephesians 4:11, and he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 28, God has set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, diversities of tongues. In the last session, I taught about evangelists. Tonight, I'm going to cover miracle workers and teachers. I include miracle workers in the quote-unquote big 7 because of the wording in 1 Corinthians 12. It starts out first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, and then it says after that, miracles. So, you have the usual quote-unquote top ruling ministries, 1, 2, and 3, but then miracles. So do you see that it's still in the top ranking? But I must emphasize that this 1, 2, 3, etc. is stating a usual situation. It's not a hard and fast rule. The reality is whatever God designates. And of course, we know, how does he designate who the leader is, who the pivotal one should be? He designates it by the supply, the epikorageo. God gives the supply that blesses the congregation to the rightful leader. Now, if you're not pivotal in a fellowship, what are you supposed to do? Compete? Fight? No, you're supposed to defer to whoever is. And that's how the body works. One day, you may be pivotal, but every minister is unique. And we have our own special mix of spiritual factors, and each church has different needs. So, you can't make a hard and fast rule. So, other ministries than these big 7 can be the top leaders too, and often, in that case, it'll be pastors. And pastors are extremely important. We're going to learn more about that. So, let's talk about miracle workers. Miracle workers, this is in that list of the ones who have mastered and are excellent with certain of the manifestations of the Spirit. That's in that category of extraordinary manifestations. Miracle workers, healers, those adept at prophecy, and those adept at tongues. Of course, that includes interpretation. So that's in this category. Miracle workers are those who have mastered the manifestation of working of miracles. But we know that we can do all the manifestations. So miracle workers also need to be proficient in the manifestation of believing and the revelation manifestations in order to do miracles. Of course, we need more miracle workers. And since desiring earnestly the best gifts still does work, if you want to excel at this, well, believe for it and see how far it goes. But if you ever have an Exceller session on miracles, please call me. I would love to see that. Miracle working also can be part of healing, but since gifts of healings are listed here separately in 1 Corinthians 12, I'm going to concentrate on the facet of miracle working that is not coupled with the gifts of healings. In other words, healers can work miracles, instantaneous healing, but I'm going to cover that with healers. So, what does that leave for miracle workers? It leaves Deliverance Ministries. The casting out of satanic spirits is a miracle. Now, of course, the moment I mention devil spirits, some untrained Christians will scoff. But I say to them, Jesus said they exist, and He cast them out. So if you call yourself a Christian, I expect you should believe what Jesus Christ said. Okay? We ought not to pick and choose what we're going to believe from what He said. On the other hand, not every malady is to be blamed on spiritual causes. So, how do we know what's what? The manifestation of discerning the spirits is how. This field is what some call spiritual warfare. I prefer to call it deliverance ministry, and it is huge. Now, it's outside of the scope of this teaching to get into all the aspects. So, for a basic start on miracle working and deliverance ministry, I recommend Sangat Bain's paper on how to heal. And Ray, I believe that's part of the Way Beyond archive. I'll find out for sure. It'll give you the information that you need to get started in this field. And God will teach you the rest. That's the only way to get the rest, because if your adeptness is in this ministry, God is going to work with you personally in your own way of seeing things, understanding things, and the phenomena that He has in your life may be totally incomprehensible to someone else. So that's why you really can't teach too much of the specifics in this, because everything is so personal. You can't teach phenomena because not everyone gets it the same way. But as you get involved helping people, God will definitely show you the information that you need to know. Either He's going to tell you, or you'll encounter another believer who is adept and he'll share it with you. But one thing for sure, you won't get it sitting on a pillow. You'll learn that by being out in the trenches and helping people. Now, there are some keys that I can add from my experience. And the first one is that the manifestation of discerning of spirits is comprehensive. Alright? It's possible for you to understand the entire spiritual process that entangles the people that you're ministering to. So, expect to see it. Don't just take a peek. Ask God to show you the whole bucket full. For example, in one place where I ministered in one of the fellowships, I found out about a young man who was charming young women. Today, we would call him a sexual predator. He was a believer, and he attended fellowships occasionally, but he had spiritual problems, and they went in cycles. And God showed me the entire cycle, which involved 3 categories of spiritual filth. It was like tag team wrestling. One enters the ring and does his thing, then the next comes in, then the next, and it cycled. First, charming would enter in, and the young man would be irresistible to some girl. And the timing and content of what he did and what he said was spiritually aided. Then sexual lust came in and did its thing. But then condemnation came in next, and the young man would feel sorry for how he had taken advantage of the young woman, and he would condemn himself, and then reject and condemn her too, and really hurt her heart. Then he'd fight back the condemnation and negatives for a while and try to renew his mind, and then he'd be okay for a while, and then the cycle would start again when he targeted his next conquest. God showed me the whole thing, the whole scenario. And there will be enablers, victims, and codependents in almost every spiritual scenario. That's not just for alcoholism and drug abuse. They want to have as much impact as possible. The spiritual invaders will work in cycles, taking people lower and lower with each go-round. And deliverers can break that cycle by teaching the victims how to renew their minds and close the loopholes in their thinking. Then the deliverers, when they cast out the spiritual infections, that is a miracle. When God showed me the whole thing, He can do the same for you. That's what manifestation of discerning of spirits is. It is the equivalent of word of knowledge and word of wisdom for the physical realm, but discerning of spirits is for the spiritual realm, and He can show the whole thing. Now, the second facet I can contribute is in my paper, God's Absolute Power Over the Spiritual Realm. That's also in the Way Beyond archives. That paper contains insights from the book of Job, which is the greatest book on discerning of spirits in the Bible. It also tracks the signpost words for this subject and features passages where they cluster. So, in Job 27, and in verse 19, it reads, "The rich man," and that's talking about the seed of Satan, "shall lie down," he'll die, "but he will not be gathered." That's the resurrection of the just. "He opens his eyes." Well, after the resurrection of the just, when is that going to happen? That'll be happening at the resurrection of the unjust, when he's judged. So he opens his eyes, and he is not. So that's the equivalent of poof, the second death. Verse 20, "Terrors take hold on him as waters. A tempest steals him away in the night. The east wind carries him away, and he departeth. And as a storm hurls him out of his place." So this allegory is not only talking about the seed of the serpent, what's going to happen to him, but it's also talking about when spirits possess people and God kicks them out. It's like the east wind carries them away. The east wind is a dry wind, okay? And as a storm, it hurls him out of his place. Verse 22, this is vivid. "For God shall cast upon him." We know this to be like spiritual lightning bolts. "And not spare, and he would fain flee out of his hand." Verse 23, "Men shall clap their hands at him, and shall hiss him out of his place." Ooh. So God's power over the dark realm includes limitations and actions against. That's also in that paper. The greatest of which I call spiritual gazillion volt lightning. It's not physical. It's spiritual. And it exists only in the spiritual realm. And the adversary and his host, they cannot withstand it. They must flee. It's like what the future lake of fire is going to be made of. These thunderbolts are what happens when we cast out evil. When we men and women hiss them out of their place, like flushing an animal that's hiding in a thicket. James 2 verse 19 also talks about this very same thing. It says, "Thou believest that there is one God." Well, you do well. The devils also believe and tremble. That word tremble is frisso. And when being cast out, there is something that terrifies them so much that they cry out. That word frisso means to be so terrified that your hair stands up. Mark 1 is an example of this. Mark 1 verse 23 and following. "And there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, Let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, thou Holy One of God." And Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Hold your peace, shut up, muzzle it, and come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had torn him and cried with a loud voice, he came out of him. So that's what happens. Don't be intimidated. That's what I'm trying to say. Let him have it. Finally, when God's given you the information needed to work a miracle, the last thing I want to share is when that happens, it's as easy as falling off a grease log backwards. Just command it. It's not like the energy comes from us. Working a miracle is as easy as speaking in tongues. They're both manifestations. So don't just pray for it, command it. See, Job said, "Men shall clap their hands at him and shall hiss him out of his place." So us men and women do that, not God. We do our part and God does his part. See, we exercise and he energizes. So exercise it decisively and boldly, okay? Now, those in the body of Christ who become renowned for their ability to work miracles should endeavor to be genuine and not self-promoters or braggarts who commend themselves or glorify themselves. Now, the reason I say this is that there are obstacles even to get to the place where you can work miracles, to believe like that. But once you have arrived, then there still are challenges. So, wielding that kind of power can get your head. So, these ministers need to discipline their minds to remain humble. Take a look at Luke. Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. And in verse 17, it says, "And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils," and this is the word daimon, that's the higher ranking, the daimonion are the lower ranking. So even the high ranking daimon are subject unto us through thy name. The word subject is interesting because in the Aramaic there's a fourth degree. We're used to good, better, and best. 3 degrees in English. But in Aramaic there's a fourth degree. There's good, there's better, there's best, and there's So anyway, that's this subject. They're subjectively, absolutely subjective unto us through thy name. But Jesus said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning fallen from heaven. He was shook up. Verse 19, Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding, in this rejoice not. Don't let it get to your head that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice, because your names are written in heaven. In that hour Jesus rejoiced in spirit and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you've hid these things from the wise and the prudent, and have revealed them unto babes. Even so, Father, for so it seemed good in your sight. See, this perspective is very important, because those who are proficient at wielding this power over the enemy can't let it get to their head. I have seen people get so fixated on the dark realm that they go off the deep end and imagine there's devil spirits around every corner. Now, we need to focus on the positive, that our names are written in heaven. Similarly, we can't get fixated on fighting and resisting the devil all the time, because that can get us out of balance. James chapter 4, verse 7 says, Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. It's not just resist the devil, there's the other part. Submit yourselves therefore to God. So we must likewise have that same balance as it said in Luke 10. See, I know some ministers who are effective at deliverance ministries, and these folks are fearless. They are unshakable. Because that's needed, because sometimes the adversary works in some expected, weird, and scary ways. But they are sure of their righteousness and the power of Christ in them, and they believe and desire to impact evil with good. Another trait they share is that they are aggressive. They seek occasions against the adversary. But they're not stupid. I'm not talking about going into an occult paraphernalia store and showing off. I'm talking about going to where people have needs, like Jesus did at the pool of Bethesda, and finding that one person who is ready. And also another trait of these people is they are persistent. Once they decide to engage the enemy, they do not give up. They do not quit. They keep on fighting and working and persisting until the keys to the situation reveal themselves and the person gets delivered. Look at Matthew 17. Here's an example of that. Matthew chapter 17. And when they were come to the multitude, verse 14, when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he's lunatic and sore vexed. For oft times he falls into the fire and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. And then Jesus answered and said, "Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him thither to me." And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, and said, "Why could not we cast him out?" And Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief. For verily I say to you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to a yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." That was in Manifestations earlier today, wasn't it? God knew what we were going to teach. What does it mean to have believing as a mustard seed? Verse 21. "Howbeit this kind goes not out but by prayer and fasting." But verse 21 is not in the text in Matthew. But what does it mean to have believing as a mustard seed? Jesus elaborated more about this in Matthew 13. He said the mustard seed is very small, yet it produces a plant that grows very large. So the point he is making is it doesn't matter if believing is quote-unquote big or small. It matters if it is genuine and vital. Because, growth, like we covered, is inexorable. It's unstoppable. It grows and grows and grows until it's huge. See? And that's having faith as a mustard seed. And these miracle workers are ones who have practiced disciplining their thinking to believe for things. They've mastered the techniques. Of course, now, some people have built believing by meditating on the Word, and they envision things. Other people have repeated what they're believing for over and over in their minds, like that woman who touched the hem of Jesus' garment. But these miracle workers have worked believing to where it is second nature. It's like a light switch for them. Click. It's on. And because they're proficient at believing, they're also adept at coaching the ones they pray for to believe. God can tell that deliverer the one key thing that'll break the log jam for that other person. The one thing that'll bless, that'll incite, that'll release the victims from their mental prison. See, verse 21 in Matthew 17 is not in the text. Scholars say that it was added to harmonize with the account of the same incident in Mark. So we're going to go to Mark, in Mark chapter 9. Because there are some more details in the Mark account that are not in Matthew that will help us understand this situation even better. Verse 17, Mark 9:17. One of the multitude answered and said, "Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he tears him, and he foams, and gnashes with his teeth, and pines away. And I spoke to your disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not." He answered him and saith, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him unto me." And when they brought him unto him, and when he saw him, straightway the spirit tare him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed foaming. So this is why I say miracle workers have to be fearless and unshakable. Because that spirit caused that child to have a grand mal seizure in front of Jesus and everyone right then. Of course, how intimidating. But that didn't faze Jesus one bit. And he asked the Father, verse 21, "How long is it ago since this came unto him?" And he said, "Of a child. And oftentimes has cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Now you see, because Jesus took the time to get involved and ask the Father questions, the keys to the situation revealed themselves. So fact number one, it was a child. Well, parents are responsible for believing for their children until they're old enough or capable enough to believe for themselves. Truth number two, it had been a long-standing situation. And would you be worn down by this if you were the parent and had gone and fallen for that long? Sure. And fact number three, it could happen at any moment, even around fires or bodies of waters. So that meant the parent had to be really vigilant. How tiring See? Fact number 4. The Father was blaming. He said the apostles could not help. And then he said, if you can do anything. And then he said, have compassion, as if Jesus was not. So you see the blaming there? So Jesus understood the keys in this situation, and he pointed the Father to realize that it was his responsibility to believe. That was that one key that the man needed to know. And Jesus gave him a promise. He said to him, verse 23, if you can believe, all things are possible to him that believes. And that was the very thing that that man needed to know. That's what these miracle workers are adept at, couching. See? And Jesus gave the man the promise, and the man latched onto it with all of his might. And he said, the Father said straightway, he cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. Boy, that's exactly how ministering works. Our believing merges with theirs. Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. You know, Jesus didn't say, stop unbelieving. No, that, help me. See? Verse 25, when Jesus saw the people come running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying to him, thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. And the spirit cried and rent him sore and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. There's just so many things in here. So, like I said earlier, miracle workers have to be fearless. Defense ministers have to be unshakable. They'll latch on like a junkyard dog and don't let go. So, later on, verse 28, when he was coming to the house, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we cast him out? And he said to them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. Now, unlike Matthew, verse 29 is in the text, except the last two words, quote, and fasting, unquote, are questionable. Many of the same manuscripts as in Matthew 17:21 are involved with the omission of the words and fasting, except there is evidence that it is in P46. P46 is an early papyrus document, although it is damaged and it's not entirely readable at that point in the text. But it looks as though and fasting is there. So I think it probably was there. I can handle it both ways, but I prefer the words and fasting to not be omitted. But the fasting I'm referring to is not the kind of going without food. There's no indication that Jesus went without food in this incident, is there? But if we understand fasting according to God's definition of what fasting is, then it fits. What's God's definition of fasting? We can find that in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 1, where it reads, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. Yeah, they seek me daily, and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to God. Then they say, wherefore have we fasted, and you don't see? Have we afflicted our soul, and you don't take any knowledge of it? Behold, God says, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exact all your labors. Behold, you fast for strife and debate. You know, I fasted better than you did. And to smite with the fist of wickedness. And you shall not fast as you do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is that such a fast that I have chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down your head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under you? Will you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is this not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, that thou bringest the poor that are cast out to your house? And when you see the naked, that you cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thy own flesh? See, that is what fasting is. See, it's getting involved with helping people. See, it's not going without food. Actually, the whole thing was, see, when they prepared food back then, it wasn't like they went to McDonald's. It was a big deal, okay? And so sometimes people were so busy helping other people that they forsook eating. That's what the fasting was. It wasn't forsaking eating, it was helping people. But they got the cart before the horse on that one. Or, as they would say in Spanish, they built the roof before the house. Okay? But that's what fasting should be. Getting involved, helping people. So, that's what Jesus did, prayer and fasting. He got involved in the situation with that man. He asked him questions. He just didn't come up and start ministering. He asked that man questions. And he persisted until the keys were revealed. And that's what genuine deliverance ministers do. They don't just skip into town and put on shows on the stage. They get down in the trenches where people are in need are, and put on their hip boots and wade into the muck and mire, and they help. And it is in that situation often that the details that people need to know reveal themselves. See? That's what I think that Jesus meant by prayer and fasting. Believing and action. See? And that fits the pattern that I have seen when observing genuine deliverance ministers. Once they decide to engage, it ain't over till it's over. And they're victorious. They're tenacious. They won't give in. They won't get scared off. Even if it's a knockdown, drag-out fight, so be it. But they'll persist until they and God win. They aggressively claim deliverance for people when they have an opportunity to minister to them. Now, as with all the manifestations, as we exercise them, God energizes them. God does not possess us and do them. We are involved. It's our job to believe and command them to happen. See, we believe to perform them by the power of God that He has placed within us. Then God energizes what we exercise. Unfortunately, there are many false workers who claim to perform signs and wonders, but they're actually lying signs and wonders. Well, how's the average Christian supposed to tell between the genuine and the counterfeit? How's he supposed to tell? Well, God has set out some very simple guidelines that anyone can follow, which work for checking these ministries. Look at the fruit. Next one. Is there both immediate and ultimate profit? Next one. Who's glorified? And finally, do they fit what the Bible says? See, false ministers can talk all they want, but their fruit will speak louder than them. And fruit cannot be counterfeited. If the fruit is flawed, then the root is bad, and nothing can cure it. So, and then the word says it must be cut off. So, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, Jesus said, but inwardly they're ravening wolves. In Matthew 7 he said, don't you know them by their fruits? Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so every tree brings forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, and neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits you shall know them. The book of James also has another checklist for the quality of fruit. In James chapter 3, verse 11, it says, doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olives? Or a vine, figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good manner of life his works with meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, don't glory and don't lie against the truth. This wisdom descends not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that's from above is first pure, then peaceful, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, and without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. So, the Word says we ought to be fruit inspectors. We all can perform some simple checks. Is there envy? Is there strife? Is what they practice peaceable or stressful? Is it gentle or harsh? Is what they teach easy to accept, or is it shoved down your throat? Is their manner full of mercy or judgment? Is good fruit present or not? Do they practice partiality or not? Do you see hypocrisy practiced or not? Is there an atmosphere of peace or not? See, anybody can sample fruit and tell if it's good or bad. We don't need anyone to do that for us. We can and should do it ourselves. And if the fruit is bad, we should have the courage to take the appropriate action or remove ourselves from that situation, if that's what the wise thing to do is. So, does what these ministers do profit? Satanic miracles may have the appearance of immediate profit, but they can't fake the long-term profit. You know, I know someone who went to the Philippines for psychic surgery, but chickened out at the last minute and did not get it. They told me that they followed up with everyone else in their group that got quote-unquote healed by Tony, that guy in Philippines that did that. Every one of them died violent deaths within a year. So profit? Satan doesn't profit. When he's done with people, he just crumples them up and throws them away. So you look at the fruit. Now, do those ministers, do they commend themselves or do they glorify God? That's the other one. John 7 verse 16, Jesus said in answer to them, my doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man do his will, he shall know the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. He that speaks of himself seeks his own glory. But he that seeks his glory that sent him, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. And then finally, does what they teach fit with what the Bible actually says? You know, false ministers can wave the Bible around in their pulpit and actually read from it from time to time. But do they encourage people to read it, and do they do what it says? See? So that is the ministry of deliverance ministry, the miracle worker. So in the next few minutes that we have left before Ed comes on, I'm going to talk about teachers. I think I can say that I'm a teacher. I don't think there's any question of that. It's one of my ministries in the body. Like another teacher said, Lenall Johnson, teaching is the convergence of what I do for a living with what I do for pleasure. Except that, alas, I don't do it for a living. I have a computer support job. I mean, I wish I could afford to just teach, but actually that other job enables me to live to teach, because teaching is in my blood. My entire family are teachers. My father taught about nature on a pioneering TV show in Toledo, Ohio that started in 1947. Later, he taught school assemblies about nature and ecology in elementary and middle schools from 1955 till 1972. My mother was a phys ed teacher. My eldest sister was a botany professor at a college in West Virginia. My younger sister was an elementary school teacher in Arizona. My two brothers and I are Bible teachers in different religious organizations. And it goes back even further than that. My aunt was a principal of an elementary school in the 40s, which was a real accomplishment for a woman at that time. Also, I have Episcopal ministers on my father's side of the family. So it's in my blood. I think I'm qualified to present this teaching on what is the heart of a teacher. So let's start out with some questions and answers. Why do we need teachers? Because others do not know or do not do what they should. Okay? Why should they know it? Well, there's many levels of answers to that question, but the highest answer is so that they can be fulfilled and glorified God. That's why they need to know. Why do people not know? Well, here's some basic reasons. First, because they're immature and they've not been taught. Or because they've been taught error. Or they don't understand because they've been taught in the wrong fashion, because there was no connection between them and the teacher. Or they might not want to know. Why do people not do what they ought? Well, here are some basic reasons. Because they do not know how to apply what they know. Or because they're afraid to do it. Or because they've been taught error and it doesn't work and they've given up. Or they don't want to do it. Okay? Genuine teachers have to face all of them at the same time sometimes, and figure out how to solve them. Well, how do you do that? With love and believing and persistence. The common denominator of genuine teaching is love. We must love what we teach, and we need to love to teach it, and we must love who we teach. Otherwise, why go through all the bother? I mean, why not revel in our high knowledge and the delicacies of truths, both subtle and gross, elevated in our self-esteem, that we know things that others could never even conceive of? Well, what good is that? It's just after we're gone like the grass of the field that withers and blows away, what's left? What good was it? If you want knowledge, you got to give it away. Then you will receive more. So, you've been blessed with knowledge and the capability to appreciate it. Well, what do you do with it? Share it. Help others. Teach it. Make a legacy. Why? Because we ought to have compassion and love for those who will live beyond us. Why should they have to go through the pain and mistakes and effort all over again of learning what we've already learned? Therefore, we need to be motivated by love. You got to remember that, because there's going to be times, there's going to be times that we will question, why are we doing this? Especially in the face of obstinance or resistance or human foibles or plain old ignorance. Why are we still holding out for our students and still endeavoring to teach them when we just close the door and let them learn by themselves, Because we love. We were there once. Yeah, I know, too bad I told you so was not enough, and too bad that sometimes people need to run into the brick wall before they are willing to listen, and too bad they're not meek and self-sufficiently think that they know, like, the generation gap thing. But if you've loved, they will come back to you when they want to learn. Folks, we already tried the wrong roads, and by the grace of God, we survived our mistakes, and we're living to tell about it, even if others don't want to hear about it yet. They're still being driven by the same deceptive enticements that once tricked us. So why do we still try? Why do we still persist? Because we love. Then, we must believe. I think the greatest manifestation of the Spirit that a genuine teacher must use is not word of knowledge, although that enables them to learn fantastic things which otherwise could not be known by any other means. God has revealed wondrous truths to us, but they're gifts of knowledge. Did we earn them? No. Did we deserve to know them? No. Neither is the greatest manifestation teachers use word of wisdom. How to traverse the confusing, morphing, ever-changing world that stands between A and B. A is how to take the knowledge we received and bring it about. B, the desired, fully impactful result. Or the manifestation of discerning spirits. That does the same thing for the other two in the spiritual realm. No, the greatest manifestation teachers should use is the manifestation of believing. Why? Because we need to persist until everyone gets it. And often, that's not a smooth, straight road. And if your first attempt doesn't connect, then try a different one. And another one. And another one. Until everyone gets it. See? Teachers must believe that their students will get it. And not all students are the same. There's different levels of intelligence. Now, is that their fault? No. It's genetics and upbringing. Does that do any good to treat them like it's their fault? No. But they can still be taught. We just rephrase, restate, illustrate, demonstrate. You see, there are 7 learning styles. Does it serve students well to only try one method? Or worse, be required to follow only one rigid technique? See, that's why I never went to college to be a teacher. I knew I had the natural ability from the very first fellowship I taught in 1972, but I also intuitively knew that I would have been miserable in the rigid educational system prevalent today in the United States. And, the PhDs in Washington know about all the different teaching styles. Yet, because of politics, they've sold out to utilizing only one method that may serve the majority of students, but it leaves many out in the cold. I hate politics because it involves power and control. It's injurious and inefficient because it only serves the selfish ends of those in power, and because of that, basically, it is knowingly ignorant. They choose those stupid things because of political advantage. In fact, I expect any time soon, one party or the other is going to try to tell us the sky is green and make us believe it. So, therefore, I say if anything's politically motivated, let it be damned. And if you're letting yourself be influenced by them, I think maybe you might need to take a step back. Well, I'm sorry, but at least you know what I think. There's 7 learning styles, and we are combinations of these. And you just can't cram everybody into the same pot. Okay? There's visual learning, where they prefer using pictures, images, and spatial understanding. Then there's auditory, where some people prefer auditory-based things, where you hear it with sound and music. Then there's verbal, where you prefer using words both in speech and in writing. So you got to write it down. You got to talk it through to remember it. There's physical learners, or kinesthetics is the term for that. You prefer using your body or your hands or your sense of touch, like people who are mechanics learn this way. There's logical or mathematical, where you prefer using logic, reasoning, and systems to remember things. There's social method, where you prefer to learn in groups or with other people. And then there's solitary, where you prefer to work alone and you use self-study. And all the students are combinations of these. You can't teach it all the same way, because you'll miss people. See? So a good teacher will vary their methodology to reach out and stimulate their students on all these levels. And like I said, you got to use believing. You have to believe that they're going to get it. I learned that in Greek class. I've probably taught about 1,000 people Koine Greek, and boy, those first sessions are difficult, because when you start talking about direct objects and indirect objects, you can see people's eyes glaze over. Bless their hearts. It's like, we all had a mental block. We were in English class in junior high and high school, and, the teacher was up in the front extolling the beauties of the English language, and we were sitting back there in the back saying to ourselves, when am I ever going to need to know this? Well, I had a whole big bunch of students that were just like that in Greek class, and so when I started talking about direct objects, they all got worried, So what do? Well, you have to believe that people are going to get it, and you fight for it, and you fight for it, and you fight for it until they do. I think the greatest thing I ever did in Greek class was in Emporia. We had a couple guys from Georgia come up and audit the class. It was a father and his son. And the son had dropped out of high school because he just said, what good is all this stuff? And so they took the Greek class, and at the end, they both got grade B, and the son scored 1 point higher than his father. And then the son said, if I can learn Greek, I can learn anything. I'm going to go back to high school. And I cried. That's the greatest reward a teacher could ever have. There's teachers needed at every level in the body. In fact, one of the criteria for leadership in the body is an aptitude to teach. So, teachers are elders who have fellowships in their homes, presbyters who oversee a local area, or those who excel in other ways, teaching an entire region or organization or culture. And just as with the ministries that we've covered so far, there's entry level, quote unquote, and mature. The mature teachers may have the gift ministry of a teacher. It's spiritual, it's energized, it's timing, where you teach what you teach and you anticipate what people are going to say, and God gives you exactly what they're going to think right when they think it, and the connection there, it all fits. It makes the interaction of teaching a spiritual thing. That's the gift ministry, see. And they've mastered the teacher's art, and they supply God's people. But teaching is not merely the ability to get people to regurgitate information, or it's not entertaining, or it's not just trying to be profound. It is the ability to transfer both knowledge and practical application, and it's very important that we understand that it is not for the purpose of knowledge only. See, whatever a teacher teaches must be useful and reach out and benefit the hearers, not just tickle their ears. Otherwise, it's worthless. If it's genuine and truly from God, it'll profit both immediately and ultimately. We also must realize that having a meeting with a teaching is not the height of Christianity. It's what people do afterward. It's what people do when they leave, when they go out into the world, that is the most important. See, that's what matters. The potential for ultimate profit is measured by God's involvement, and it has to be relevant. How easy can it be assimilated, and how can it be practically applied? You see, knowledge for knowledge's sake is dangerous. It puffs people up. Consequently, teachers must dry themselves to make everything practical and break it down logically and systematically so that everyone can understand and apply. Isaiah 28, verse 9 says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breasts. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little." So it's got to be systematic, and you build upon one upon the other, upon another, and you don't skip steps, here a little and there a little. You don't assume that people know things. And when you teach, you just don't teach to the brightest people in the room, because you'll miss people. You also teach to the people who may not get it the first time. So you have to rephrase. So it involves a balance where you've got to keep the people who already are on top of what you're saying involved, but then you got to bring the other people along with it. So it takes believing, and you got to be attentive. You got to watch your people and see their expressions on their faces and be able to understand what's going on so that you can reach them, see? Because the goal of all instruction is action. And a good teacher will be perceptive and convey what needs to be taught to get it done, see? And the thirst for knowledge has to be kept in balance, because what keeps that in balance is application. If what you teach cannot be proven or applied, what good is it? See, yeah, there are some things that, interest people, but I'd rather teach something that's practical. So, right doctrine is maintained by right practice. And this was emphasized in the Old Testament with the theme of keep and do. That principle is presented in the book of Deuteronomy. Turn to Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy chapter 29. verse 1, these are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, beside the covenant which he made with them in Horeb. And Moses called unto all Israel and said to them, You have seen all the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt unto Pharaoh and unto his servants and unto all his land, the great temptations which your eyes have seen, the signs and those great miracles. Yet the Lord hath not given you a heart to perceive, and eyes to see, and ears to hear unto this day. And I, Moses, have led you 40 years in the wilderness, and your clothes are not grown old upon you, and your shoe is not grown old upon your foot. You have not eaten bread, neither have you drunk wine or strong drink, that you might know that I am the Lord your God. And when you came into this place, Sihon the king of Heshbon and Og the king of Bashan came out against us unto battle, and we smote them. And we took their land and gave it for an inheritance unto the Reubenites and the Gadites and to the half-tribe of Manasseh. Keep, therefore, the words of this covenant and do them. And the benefit is that you may prosper in all that you do. See? So this was a solemn occasion. They made a covenant, and they had to keep it and do it. Why? Verse 18. Lest there should be among you a man or a woman, starts individually, or family or tribe, it gets worse, whose heart turns away this day from the Lord our God, to go and serve the gods of these nations, lest there should be among you a root that bears gall and wormwood. And it come to pass that when he hears the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, It doesn't matter, I shall have peace, though I walk in the imaginations, the twistings of my heart, to add drunkenness to thirst. These verses are just fascinating, because if you don't keep and do, then you'll be susceptible to a root that bears gall, which is opium, or wormwood. And that's what happens. See, if you don't keep and do, then people can get into teaching that's like opium. It's intoxicating. It's floating off into Never Land, theories that are fascinating and entertaining but not practical, see, and it doesn't work. So when it doesn't work, the other reaction is wormwood, poison. People just get poisoned. They try it and it doesn't work, and they become disillusioned just like they took poison, see. But yet the people who are pushing this stuff, when they hear the words of the curse, they're going to bless themselves in their heart, saying, I'm going to have peace, it doesn't matter, though they walk in the imagination of their heart. And then to add drunkenness to thirst, that's like having itching ears where you can't scratch it. You're thirsty, but you're so thirsty you can't satisfy it. And that's what this stuff is like. It doesn't satisfy because you can't do it. See? Wrong teaching or impractical teaching that has no practical application has the potential to infect the congregation, so they turn away from the true God and worship false gods. And if you're a teacher, don't do that. Okay? We're held responsible. So we don't want people to be filled with gall or opium or wormwood. We don't want that, because in Deuteronomy 29 verse 29 it says the secret things belong to the Lord our God. Okay? And there's some things that we just don't know. They're out there in the spiritual realm. But God's revealed unto us certain things, and those things that He has revealed belong to us and our children forever. Why? That we may do all the words of this law. See, He tells us stuff not to entertain us. He tells us stuff so we can apply it. And we have no right to intrude into those secret things that belong to God. Those things are out of bounds. A teaching that's like pushing opium, and it's based on fantasy, not fact. Can't be proven by practical application. But what God revealed to us is practical, because we can do it. So that's what we need to concentrate on. Colossians 2 has a similar, verse 18, let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which he has not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. So, teachers should not beguile their students. We ought to teach them the truth. And so, you have to push yourself to be practical, not spectacular. And if you teach something new, you need to look for how it can be applied, or wait until you've researched it all out so you see the whole thing, the doctrine, practice, all of that, so its fruit can be fully proved and understood. See, make it useful. And also, don't tire with teaching the milk of the Word. It is so important to go back to the basics and encourage people to do the basics. You know, that's what makes the best athletes, right? The ones that concentrate on the basics. I mean, meat is good, but you can't just eat meat. You gotta eat a balanced diet. So, we want to see the legacy of what we have taught go on, and that's what you need to do. So, to close, I'm going to read to you the poem by Henry Van Dyke, which we're familiar with. What constitutes a school? Not fashion or renown or wealthy patronage and rich estate. No, one of these can crown a school with light and make it truly great. But teachers, strong and wise, who teach because they love the teacher's task and find their richest prize in eyes that open and minds that ask. And I am grateful to all of you because of that. I love you. Bless you.